Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting you the latest developments in the Israel versus Iran conflict and escalation that has now reached Iran's strategic oil and gas infrastructure, marking a dangerous new phase in this entire war. Israeli warplanes have struck the Shehran oil depot in western Tehran, a major fuel storage hub, remember. Iran's oil ministry has claimed that the fire is under control, but videos emerging out of the country show flames raging at the site. This is a strategic shift. Israel is now targeting Iran's energy infrastructure, which is a move that could disrupt supplies and send global markets into further turmoil. Now let's tell you what's the significance of the Shahran oil depot. The Shahran oil depot is one of Tehran's key fuel storage and distribution hubs. It supplies petroleum products to critical civilian and military sectors in and around the capital. The depot sits near major highways and industrial zones, making it a strategic asset for urban fuel logistics. Hitting Shehran is a tactical move on part of Israel to disrupt Iran's domestic energy stability and signal vulnerability even in the country's core urban centers. Targeting such a facility, remember, escalates the war from nuclear and military sites to economic warfare, aimed at undercutting Iran's ability to sustain prolonged operations. Take a look at this report filed by AP correspondent John Gembrell, who explains the situation on ground.
Iran has launched a series of retaliatory missile strikes on Israel in the last 24 hours. This is after Israel has launched just a devastating attack on Iran that has seen much of its senior military leadership killed. Now, these strikes that happened in Israel focused primarily around the area of Tel Aviv. There was destruction in private homes and other areas, and in Israel, they say at least 3 people are dead and dozens of others suffered injuries. Now, in Iran, at least 70 people have been killed in these Israeli strikes so far. That's according to casualty information offered by the Iranians, who also say hundreds of others were wounded. We do know that top leaders in their military, including the head of the Revolutionary Guard and the Army Chief of Staff, among others, are dead. As this is going on, even today, the Israelis have been able to basically own the skies over Iran. They've been striking targets across the country.
Now remember, Israel's Operation Rising Lion has involved over 200 warplanes, striking more than 150 targets, including nuclear sites, military bases and energy facilities. Meanwhile, Iran's retaliation has been codenamed as True Promise 3. It has seen over 150 missiles and 100 drone strikes in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa and other cities in Israel. Iran has reported that at least 78 people have been dead, including senior commanders and nuclear scientists, with over 320 people who've been wounded. Israel, on the other hand, has reported 7 to 9 civilian casualties and over 200 injured people. Iran has called Israel's strikes a declaration of war and has threatened to expand targets to include US bases as well in the region. Meanwhile, Israel says its strikes have set back Iran's nuclear program by years. In fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu has warned that Israeli warplanes will soon be over Tehran again. The Israeli Defense Forces claim aerial superiority, striking Iranian military and energy sites at will. All right, on Times Now, I'm joined by my colleague Rishabh. I'm also joined by Mr. Robinder Sachdev, foreign affairs expert. Shortly, we'll be joined by Major General G.C. Dwivedi as well, global and strategic affairs expert. Before I come to all of you, let me quickly get this breaking news that is coming in at the moment to us. As per Israeli Air Force, missile launchers in Iran were identified and they were attacked. In the last hour, the Air Force completed another wave of attacks in western Iran against missile storage and launch infrastructure. Documentation of an attack on surface-to-surface missile launchers in Iran by aircraft. That's the latest that is coming in. Let me quickly understand this from Rishabh. Rishabh, what more details do you have on this?
Well, what we're given to understand, Shreya, that Israel is choosing a location and hitting the location. Israeli Air Force has a complete dominance in air over the Iranian infrastructure, and Iranian Air Force for many hours now, at least 6 to 7 hours, what we are given to understand that there is a complete superiority of Israeli Air Force, for that matter, over the skies of Iran. And now what we are now given to understand that the missile launches. Remember, there have been over 300 ballistic missiles, as per IDF, that has been launched toward Israel from Iran. Certain sources in Iran also confirmed these numbers. Now what we are given to understand that surface-to-surface missile launcher has been decimated by Israeli Air Force. So in a way, Israel is not only hitting the targets in Iran, but also ensuring that the Iran's retaliatory, tactics, technique, and capability is hit equally.
Right.
And that's the reason that we saw the nuclear sites were targeted, the army's military sites were targeted, the fuel dump was targeted, and now the missile launchers are being targeted as well.
Right, Rishabh, I'll keep coming back to you for the latest on this conflict. Let me quickly go across to my guests on the show. General Dwivedi, can I understand from you the fact that now Israel is targeting those fuel storage facilities and oil depots that also supply fuel to military facilities around Tehran? What kind of an impact do you think it's going to be having? Obviously, instant destruction is what Iran is witnessing at the moment.
Shreya, actually, you're right that there's a shift in the targeting as far as Israel is concerned, because in the initial phase, the targeting was primarily the nuclear facilities and also the leadership they had taken it out. Now, see, economy is a very important part of any warfare. And Iranian economy is largely dependent upon oil and gas. Therefore, they are targeting these facilities because of two things. One is economy per se, and secondly, of course, without fuel, your forces cannot function. So they are now getting on to the logistics, more focused on economic part, and at the same time, they're also taking out a lot of air defense, assets like the missile launchers, the missile sites. Because in fact, I would like to put across that Israel has gone very, very systematically in this operation. They first started to take out all the air defense systems of Iran. That's why they could have tremendous success in the opening phase, and their strategy is always preemptive. So all I can say is that in any war, these strategic targets keep shifting. Yeah. Now, the Israel shifted more on the oil and logistic infrastructure, because that is ultimately going to pinch the nation as such, and also the logistics of the armed forces. Shreya.
Okay. All right, let me also get this breaking news that's coming in at the moment for my viewers. The Israeli Defense Forces viewers has just released a major evacuation order for Iran, instructing all Iranians who currently or are in the near future will be in and around military weapons factories in the country and their supporting institutions to immediately leave these areas and not return until further notice. They've also added, and I quote, "Your presence near this infrastructure puts your life at risk." So Israel really, doubling down on the kind of attacks that it chooses to use against Iran. Rabinder Sachdev, the fact that Israel has sustained its attack on Iran, there's a lot of interesting dynamic that is playing out in the West Asian region, even as this conflict deepens. You've got a US who's saying we have nothing to do with these attacks, yet you have America and the European Union somewhat supporting Israel. You've got a China who's saying, we are with Iran and we don't mind sort of being there in the middle to mediate. So there are, of course, global dynamics being playing out in the West Asian region, which is not new to the region. But how do you see this now moving forward?
Thank you so much. Amel, call it the new. We see the new normal out there now. This war which is going on, it is a war. As you very rightly say, there are n number of players with their n number of interests, other than, even the US and China. US, whatever it may say, it's very clear, absolutely, not only it's supporting, it's defending Israel.
Yeah.
Okay, let's be clear on that from what we know in the past. The previous wave of attacks, remember, when Iranian missiles were lobbed, US and NATO forces defended. This time also similarly. One. Secondly, definitely, yes, the countries in the region, the Saudis, the UAE, Bahrain, they themselves, their leadership, I think, are under stress also, because what is happening out here now, the US does have military bases in these countries also.
Yeah.
And Iran has said and threatened whether it can actually implement or not, that's the question. But to some extent, it can bring some harm to these bases, or saying that these countries are harboring Americans who are, helping to defend Israel. Therefore, these countries also become enemies of Iran. So therefore, Iran is justified in attacking them. So that could play out. Also, in any case, in these countries, again, talking specifically West Asia, their leaderships have been, of course, cozying up to the United States and turning a blind eye to the Palestinian cause. There's no doubt on that. Whereas on the other hand, their wider populations, many of them are sentimentally more aligned towards the interests of Gaza and hold sympathy for them. So these countries, their rulers are also kind of sitting on tentative, issues that how to manage their own political bases in their countries.
Yeah.
But back to Iran and what's happening, Israel has definitely established air superiority. And this attack on the oil and gas facilities, in ways it's been said that it is to inform or warn or tell Iran that it should stop pouring missiles on Israel. Otherwise, all its energy infrastructure would also be, destroyed. And the mere, in a way, if you look at the audacity of Israel to issue this warning to Iranians that move away from military facilities or storage sites, it indicates that Israel is able to establish its dominance. Israel is doing that right now. Now, how Iran can, counter
Dave,
that?
I'm going to come back to this dominance bit and who has more edge on the other. But let me also tell our viewers how world leaders have been reacting to this entire conflict. Remember, viewers, world leaders are calling for restraint at the moment. President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin have held a 50-minute phone call where they've urged both sides to de-escalate. In fact, not just them, it's French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Merz, as well as the United Nations, who have called for an end to this kind of an escalation in the conflict. The UK, meanwhile, has deployed RAF Typhoons in response to Iranian threats against British bases. But as we've been talking, American President Donald Trump in his latest statement has said, and I quote, "The US has nothing to do with the attack on Iran. If we're attacked in any way, shape or form by Iran, the full strength and might of the US armed forces will come down on you at levels never seen before. However, we can easily get a deal done between Iran and Israel and end this bloody conflict." Meanwhile, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in an earlier call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has called for restoration of peace and stability. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how the world has been reacting. They've been calling for de-escalation. Clearly, that hasn't been happening. General Dwivedi, in terms of who has the edge, we've been talking about how Israel has the technical and the tactical superiority over Iran. But the fact of the matter also remains that Iran has indigenous tech. It has indigenously built its nuclear arms and weapons, and therefore there lies its strength as well, even though it might right now be suffering long-term setbacks and damage.
Well, Shreya, the point is, when you talk about air power or when you talk about the assets in the air, there are two things which are very important. First is what equipment you have and how the equipment is actually operationalized by the people or by the forces. Now, from day one, since when the Israel came into being, they have laid a lot of emphasis on their defense, on the armed forces, and their strategy has always been preemptive. I mean, they never react, they always take the first initiative. So therefore, they have to have the offensive capability, and that they have built up over a period of time. If you see the inventory of Israelis, they have got the top-of-the-line aircraft like F-35, that is stealth fighter, 5th generation. Then they have got F-16. And matching with that, they also built up the air defense capability, because in any warfare, you have to, either you are offensive or you are defending. So they have both the parallel capability. Whereas when you come to Iran, well, Iran has a defensive capability. It means they can fire mostly the ground-based missiles. They don't have a good air force. All aircrafts are obsolete or vintage. like MiG-29. It's a not even fourth generation aircraft, or they have Su-24, which is almost third generation. The point I'm trying to make is, as far as equipment is concerned, Israel is miles ahead. Their operationalization of the assets, again, they have a distinct edge, but you cannot actually undermine Iran. Iran has the capability because they have built up good deal of missile power, and they were almost inching to the nuclearization of their country or nuclearization of the armed forces. But they have a lot of strength on the army. But ironically, this war is being fought in the air because two countries do not share the border. They have a million-strong army, but that is not going to come into play because this war is largely going to be in this space.
Okay. Before I shift our focus to the India impact of this, Rabinder Sachdev, can I then understand from you, the fact that Iranian economy has been crippled by the several sanctions that have been slapped against it. Obviously, Iranians have been suffering the kind of domestic situation that they have for a very long period of time. And there's a lot of talk and speculation about how, this is an opportune moment for Iranians to stand up against the regime, against the supreme leader. Do you think it's going to happen this time?
It is very much in the play. And as you very rightly said, sanctions have been in play for several years, and, domestic audiences are turning against the regime. That is the political intent of sanctions whenever US imposes against any nation, be it Cuba, North Korea, Iran, etc. They may work or may not work, or the leaders may have such a dictatorial grip that it doesn't work, but that is the intent. Now, in the case of Iran, yes, that is definitely also there. Also there, you see for Iran, majorly, and one more thing to see in the global wars which are right now, Israelis, in addition to their technology and being able to, dominate, they've been able to infiltrate Iran. They've been able to have human intelligence. They've been able to buy out double agents. Where are they getting the exact information about a meeting being held? Sure, electronic eavesdropping and all is there, but they've been able to get people in the ground in the country. They've been able to get their trucks with, drones parked near military bases, etc. And this reminds us and our viewers of what Ukraine also did. Remember in Russia a few weeks ago. So this is another new dimension to the modern warfare that is emerging. And I think all countries must take note of it, should be taking note, including India, that when you're waging a war, it's not only the war is being fought on your boundaries, let's say tanks to tanks, men to men, or aircraft to aircrafts, or air defense and air offense. There are elements and assets which could be planted inside your country, which also come into play, kick in.
Absolutely. All right, before I move on to how India can deal with it, let's also tell you viewers, India has been closely monitoring this entire situation with energy security at the forefront. Remember, oil prices have surged nearly 9%, clearly putting a pressure on the Indian rupee and raising inflation fears. Now, experts warn that this could spill into maritime routes like the Strait of Hormuz and further disrupt global supplies. West Asia, remember, stands at a dangerous crossroad as cities burn, oil depots have been exploding, and the entire world holds its breath. And we have, remember, been getting you the latest developments on this. We're right now getting a breaking news. These are visuals, ladies and gentlemen, of an Iranian missile striking a residential high-rise in Bat Yam, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv. The building was entirely civilian. There was no military facility anywhere in the area. That visual is from a suburb of Tel Aviv. That's the latest visual that has come in. Let's also get you the visuals of UK fighter jet. We will, of course, in a short while from now, get you those visuals which have made emergency landing. But, let me quickly go across to General Dwivedi. General Dwivedi, therefore, then how do you see this proceeding forward? The fact that initially both sides will say we're only targeting military facilities, that clearly has expanded to energy infrastructure and now civilian areas as well.
Well, Shreya, the point is that, as I said, that the targets keep shifting as the war progresses, and there are very clear aims and objectives. As far as Israel is concerned, they want to bring Iran on their knees and cripple them both militarily and economically. And therefore, what we are seeing is that the shift of target both have different strategy. as far as the Israel is concerned, they are going to target the military infrastructure, of course, the logistics and nuclear sites. But Iran strategy is slightly different. Is going to head for the logistic infrastructure, like they went in for Haifa port. They are also gone in for the Ben Gurion airport. Now their aim is to cause fear or psychosis, because after all, the war is fought in different places. One is on the battlefield. Yeah. Second is the information warfare. Now, this is how the Iranians are going to put a fear among the average citizen of Israel. That and that another important point is Israel is very, very averse to taking casualties, because they just don't accept casualties. So therefore, I think Iran policy will be to go in for strategic infrastructure and also go for the civilian targets, so that they are able to bring in certain amount of psychological pressure on the citizens of Israel.
Basically, despite calls for de-escalation, nobody is willing to de-escalate and step down. But of course, it's not just the war between these two countries. It's going to have its ripple effect on the entire world, including oil prices. The ripple effect and the impact of which will be felt by all of us. I'll leave it there. Mr. Rubinder Sachdev and General Dwivedi, thanks very much to both of you gentlemen for joining us and sharing your perspective of what this really means and how the Israel versus Iran conflict is going to be moving forward. With that, viewers, it's time for a short break. News and updates continue on Times Now.